Well, as many of you know, these past few days for the Reeve family and for me have been days of remembrance and reflection. My brother Bob went on to be with Jesus just a few days ago on Saturday, February 20th at about 3:30 in the afternoon. And in fact, we will be hosting his celebration. We offered our campus to do a great outdoor celebration of his life on Saturday, March 13th. I want to say that again, make sure I got it right. Saturday, March 13th at 10 a.m. And if any of you would like to come out for that, I know that the family would greatly appreciate that. Still, despite all we've kind of been going through recently, it would not be right of me to stand in this pulpit unless I believed I had a word from God for you. And I do. This is a message that it's not simply like a funeral message or something like that. It is a message that I believe God wants you to get because it'll make a difference in your life right now. My soul in these last few days became anchored in a passage of Scripture, but that many of you know. It's found in Matthew chapter 25, and let me begin by just reading one verse. When it says, "The master replied, 'Well done.'" I could stop right there because a lot of you know that passage. "Well done," but it goes on to say, "Good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness." While this phrase, "well done," certainly sounds like a great title for a eulogy, and it is, it's actually a phrase that is used in the Bible during a parable that Jesus told, the parable of the talents. And this parable of the talents, remember that parable where the master gave one servant 5 talents and another servant he gave 2 talents and another servant he gave 1 talent, and then he comes back and they give an account. And we'll touch on that in just a moment. But that parable even is actually in the context of a question the disciples had asked Jesus in Matthew chapter 24. Because in Matthew chapter 24, Jesus is drawing to the close of his life. They don't know this yet, but he is. And they're walking around the temple grounds, and watch this. The disciples say, "Lord, look at all these beautiful buildings. For the temple of the Lord's day, called Herod's temple, was spectacular." And so Jesus, he hears them bragging about this building, kind of like, "Hey, have you seen that new stadium they built for the Rams and the Chargers, SoFi? Or have you seen this? Have you seen that?" And then later on, they leave the Temple Mount and they go up into the Mount of Olives, which is a beautiful place to be. Many of you have been to the Holy Land because it overlooks not only the temple grounds where the Dome of the Rock is now for Islam, but it also looks the old city of Jerusalem over. Very, very beautiful view. And when Jesus gets up there, he says to them, "You know that temple you just showed me?" He says, "Not one stone is going to be left upon another by the time things are all done." In other words, that thing is going to be destroyed. Now the disciples, when they hear this, they go, "Lord, tell us when this is going to happen. And what are the signs of your coming?" It's kind of like asking, "Lord, when are you going to come again?" Matthew 24 is a very what we call eschatological passage. Eschatology is the study of last things. What are the signs that will trigger your coming and the end of the age? And of course, if you know what Jesus says, he starts off by warning them about false prophets, false apostles. He says, "Many will come in my name, many will claim to be religious leaders, many will say this and many will say that." He says that's going to happen. He talks about wars and rumors of wars. He says before that happens, there'll be great distress upon the planet. There'll be famines. In fact, I would even say if we were to talk today, he might even start talking about a lot of pandemics. I pray not, but what if this pandemic is just the first among many that are still to come in our lifetime or your kids' lifetime or your grandkids' lifetime? Jesus talked about that. He also notes that intense persecution will arise against the people of God. And if you're paying any attention right now, there's there's more than underlying persecution against the church right here in America today. He talks about an apostasy. He says, many who at one time called themselves Jesus people are going to start to fall away. And I'm certainly seeing some of that today. Here's another thing he says. This is so incredible. He says, and because wickedness is multiplied, the love of many will grow cold. In other words, the opportunities to just sin and to go your own way and to do whatever you want to do are going to become so available and so prevalent. There'll be so much of it every place that even some of my best people will have their hearts that at one time loved me turn away, and their hearts will grow cold. Very, very sad. But he does, by the way, this all sounds kind of negative right now, but he does notice, by the way, he does note, I should say, in Matthew chapter 24, verse 13, he says, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. It's not the point of my message right now, but I want to challenge someone. And you've joined us right now. Yes, you can. Stand firm. And having given it your all, still stand. Never quit. But then when he starts to get to the end of chapter 24 and to our passage in Matthew chapter 25, he flips the script by saying to them not to spend all their time trying to figure out when he's going to return. I want to say that to you again. Nothing wrong with people studying about the second coming, but Jesus warned us. He said, don't spend all your time trying to figure out when I'm going to come back, because nobody really knows the day or the hour. In fact, he says, I don't even know the day or the hour that the Father has set on his agenda. But he does say, here is what you ought to do. And boy, is this a word for today. He says, here's what you ought to do. You ought to be two things: watchful and faithful. Let me say that again: watchful and faithful. And in talking about this, Jesus then proceeds to tell two parables. He tells the first parable about what we used to call the 10 virgins. Probably it would mean more to people today if you called them 10 bridesmaids, who were all excited about the wedding coming up. And back in those days, they would go out to meet the bridegroom. And it says 5 of the bridesmaids, they were prepared because they not only had lamps, they had oil for their lamps. The other 5 had lamps, but they hadn't taken the time to prepare. They hadn't thought things through, so they didn't have any oil. So when the bridegroom didn't quite come back when they expected, and then he finally did, the ones that were prepared had enough, but the other ones weren't prepared. Again, he's trying to say, be watchful and be ready, because you don't know when the bride is going to be ready to receive the bridegroom. Then he tells our parable. The parable of the talents. By the way, one talent was worth around 6,000 days of the wages of a common laborer. That's anywhere from 15 to 20 years of just someone that works and gets paid for it. That's a lot of money. I mean, I don't want to figure it out right now, but if someone just offered you 15 to 20 years of what an average American makes per year and gives it to you, that'd be something. That's just one talent. So the guy that only got one talent, he still got something pretty good. Another guy got twice that much, and of course the third guy got 5 times that much. And then it says, and the master told them, he said, I'm going to go away for a while. Didn't tell him how long. And when I come back, I want you all to give me an account of what you've done with what I've given you. Our English word talent comes from this story, because back then, talent meant money. As I said a moment ago, around 15 to 20 years worth of work. But then it came to mean not just money, it came to be the gifts and skills and abilities but that people have. Now, when the master came back, you know the story. 2 of them heard, well done, good and faithful servant, because the one who had been given 5 had put it to work, he'd invested it, and he had doubled it and made 5 more. The other one who was given 2, he had put him to work and had doubled it and now had 4. And they heard, well done, good and faithful servant. But the third one had just buried his talent. Some of us today, man, we have, how often have you heard me say over the years, one of the most frustrating things in ministry, and it is, I just got to get past it, is to spend your life preaching, mentoring, pastoring, trying to help people who you know have nuclear potential and who too often settle for firecracker lives. Wow, wow, wow. So this one guy, so don't bury your talents. I'd rather, by the way, have to go and stand before God and having made a mess of my life, but at least I tried. I feel like an athlete that at least I played the game. I struck out every time, but I tried. Somehow to me, that's more meaningful than a guy that said, I was too afraid to play, so I didn't even play. I don't think I'm very good at baseball or very good at this. That person heard, you wicked and lazy. Remember the old joke? You're wicked. Oh, I want a second opinion. You also lazy. Wicked and lazy. So he says, get out of here. So my point to you here this morning is, I want you to be ready to hear that phrase, well done, good and faithful servant. How can we do that? Well, from this passage that I didn't read all of it to you, let me just make a couple real quick points that this will impact your life. Number one, this story tells us, number one, that we need to use, develop, and grow the gifts that we have. Let me say that to you again. We need to use, develop, and grow the gifts that we have been given. Let me ask you a question. Why is it, do you think, that the guy that was given only one talent, it was still a lot. Again, I want to say this again. If it's worth 15 years, even minimum wage, let's say minimum wage gets up to $15 an hour. I can't do the math, but if you put, how much would you make a year? How much would you make over 15 to 20 years? Even that's quite a bit. But what caused that guy that only had one talent to not want to do anything with it, to just bury it? One of the key things is that he got caught up in comparing himself to others. Well, man, that guy's got 5 talents. That guy has 2 talents. And because he was intimidated in the comparison, he decided to do nothing. I love what Paul says in Galatians. Paul says in Galatians, pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done. There's that phrase again, well done. You'll get the satisfaction of a job well done if you pay attention to your own stuff. And you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else. The real tragedy is not that this guy buried his talent. The real tragedy is in that he didn't realize what God had put into him. In fact, do you know that before God even gives you a talent, he's already put something in your heart? Before God puts anything in your hand, he's always already given you abilities in your mind and in your body. Today, in our culture, our conversation is a lot about fair share and about what's equal results for different people. When I was growing up in America, the emphasis was on equal opportunity, which I'm still a strong believer in. No one should not be allowed to have an equal opportunity. The playing field should be level. But that has switched now in our culture. That has switched to where now not only do people need to have equal opportunity, everyone should have the same result. Everyone should get the same thing. It's almost like everyone in class, no matter how hard or how hard you worked in class or how lazy you are, at the end we're all just going to get a C, because that would be what's fair. That's not what this parable, by the way, teaches. This guy, he compared himself to the others and he withdrew. Never hang back because you don't think you have what somebody else has. Rather than complaining about what you have in your hand, why not use what God has put in your heart? So number one, listen, use, develop, and grow the gifts that you have. And by the way, even if you don't think you have any gifts, do the best you can with what you have. I'd encourage you on that. Secondly, and this is huge, how are we going to get a well done? Secondly, we need to develop and maintain a healthy image of God. Not only did the guy with only one talent look at others and compare, and therefore he was dead in the water. He did something just as seriously incorrect. He looked at God and he complained. It amazes me that the Bible says we human beings are made in the image of God, but ever since we've been on this planet, we start making God in our image. And I'm not simply talking about idols that we think about in olden days in those foreign nations where people literally worship statues. I'm talking about what my image of God is and what your image of God is. Sometimes the issue is not only do we believe in God or not, it's, yeah, but what is this God like to us? Listen to what this one guy said when the master came back and said, hey, how'd you guys all do with what I gave you? Look what he said. Notice this. He comes up, look, sir, I know that you are a hard man to please. Uh-oh. I know people who deep down, if they're to be brutally honest, think God, there probably is a God, but he is impossible to please. Maybe you had a daddy, or maybe you had a mother who, no matter how hard, they were never happy with you, never pleased with you, and now you project that upon your own image. Listen, you are now making God in your image. He says, man, you're a hard man to please. You're a shrewd and ruthless businessman who grows rich on the back of others, which means you're not even fair. I was afraid of you, so I went and hid your money and buried it in the ground, but here it is, take it. You see, this guy's image of God was all messed up. He saw God as hard, as impossible, as things. And you know what? I don't want to go off on this too much right now, but it is a natural, instinctive reaction when something really tough happens to either want to say, well, I don't think there is a God, or project all kinds of stuff upon that God. Even me, look at this. Even me, when my brother passed away a little over a week ago, part of me wants to say, God, come on, man. Would it have killed you to give him 10 or 15 more years so he could watch his grandkids grow up? Would it somehow have thrown the universe out of kilter? Maybe to step in and to help his lungs recover, to get him off that ventilator and to bring him home where I really wish he was still there today. And most of us know what that's like. Some of you have lost kids, and yet you still love God. That's amazing. Again, your flesh wants to say, God, would it have really killed you to touch my son and to heal my son so he could still be with us today? Look, our image of God. In fact, before I go on, I'll never forget this. About a year after my dad died, and my dad died in church, was it the year 2000, I believe it was? He died in church during a service, and it was traumatic for the church at that time. About a year later, one of the guys who had come to the church through my dad, and I hadn't seen him at church about a year, so hey, it's good to see you, where you been? And he actually said to me, and he didn't mean to have this come across bad, but it sure did to me. And by the way, I never let him know. I was nice. I was pastoral back. But he, in essence, told me, man, Pastor, the death of your dad so blew me out of the water that I don't know, man. I just have a hard time going to church and thinking about your dad. I have a hard time right now. I don't know why God would allow that. And I just tried to encourage him. But you know what I really thought? I thought, wait a minute. You're telling me that you don't come to church because of the impact of my dad. So, and I can promise you this, the last thing my dad would want would be for his life or his death to impact you in a way where you don't even want to hang around God anymore. Well, God, I don't understand. You're unpleasable. You're mean sometimes, God. Look, how we view God and how we view church makes a huge difference as to whether or not we're ever going to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And to maintain a healthy and a strong image of who God is, to maintain that during thick and thin, good and bad, it takes courage. During this pandemic, It takes courage and guts and staying in the Bible. You got to keep renewing your mind because there's so much crud out there. You need to pray. I want to thank some of you because you've stayed plugged in. It's amazing. So you did it. You've kind of gone into Zoom with a few other people. I don't know what all the technology is called, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever all these things are called. But even though, you've done it. It's amazing because we used to call that gumption. It takes courage and gumption to maintain a healthy image of God, to stay faithful of God. You keep trying to be the right kind of person even when you don't understand it. Many other people don't understand you. Well, don't you want to go out drinking with us? Oh man, when you're going through hell, that gets tempting. Even if you're a church-going, Jesus-loving child of God, when you're going through hell, and part of you says, see there, God's not all that concerned with you anyway, and apparently this ain't doing you any good, because look where you're at now. It takes a strong person to say, I'm going to hang in. How about this verse in Job? This is an overlooked verse, but remember, you guys remember Job, don't you? He lost everything. His whole family died except his wife. He lost his money. He lost his respect. He was in pain. He was sick. And his friends were saying, you ought to just curse God and die, man. But listen to this one verse in Job chapter 13, verse 15. I love this verse. Job finally says to his friends to kind of shut him up. He says, though he slay me, yet will I serve him. Let me say that again. Even if God kills me, even if God crushes me, I'm still going to trust him. I'm still going to believe in him. Now listen, that is not our theology. We don't believe God's a big God up there just looking for an excuse to wipe you out. But I love that level of trust. Even if this thing kills me, if God himself takes me out, I'm not going to stop trusting him. But by the way, I don't have time right now, it's not my message, but the very next thing Job says, which totally cracks me up, he says, but I'm still going to go bring my case to him. I still love God, I trust God, but I'm still going to ask God someday, why'd you take my dad like that? Would it have killed you to have him live through the weekend of our 20-year celebration or wherever it was back then? So I love, God, if you kill me, I still love you, I still trust you. But Job's like, but I still have a few questions. How about this one? Habakkuk. Habakkuk says, he was a prophet when Israel was going through some tough times, and he says, even though the fig trees have no blossoms, and there are no grapes on the vines, even though the olive crop fails and the fields lie empty and barren, even though the flocks die in the fields and the cattle barns are empty. Are you getting the image here? Nothing's going right. Again, this is almost beyond a pandemic. Everything has fallen apart and there's nothing going right, but look what he says. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will be joyful in the God of my salvation. Man, that takes guts, that takes courage. That's someone like Jesus says, but he who stays faithful to the end will be saved. And by the way, when it says saved there, it's not just talking about going to heaven. It means God will sustain you and protect you right now during this life. Well, I'm spending too long on this. Let me say, if you want to hear well done, good and faithful servant. Number one, right now, start using the gifts and skills and talents God has given you. Develop and grow them. Number two, try to develop and maintain, even during tough times, a healthy image of God. Don't allow your circumstances to make you think God's mean, God's angry, No. You keep your mind renewed through the Word. And finally, can I just say to you, another good thing to do is just to stay grateful. Just to stay grateful. Did you notice that the two guys who got rewarded? Well, let me go back. The guy that wasn't rewarded, the first thing he says is, look. He goes, look, master, I knew you're a tough guy. I knew you're a tough boss, man. So I buried it, and here it is. The two guys who invested it, who risked, that's right, they took risks. Those two guys, the first thing they said, here, Lord, here's what you entrusted us. Do you see the gratefulness there? God, here's what you gave us. God, why couldn't you give Bob a few more years? But ultimately, thank you, God, that he got 65 years. God, here's what you entrusted to him. It's all him. It's what he has given us. I've come to tell you today that if you will use and develop and grow the gifts that God has given you, even right now, if you will grow and maintain a healthy image of God, even during challenging times, and if you will be grateful and acknowledge that it all comes from Him anyway, you are someday going to hear, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And by the way, if you're feeling like that, "Oh man, I'm in trouble, boy, that's okay. One of the most challenging times in my academic life, let me share this very quickly, is when I was going for my master's degree at Fuller Theological Seminary, and it was tough. And then I took what they called Hebrew, which was a killer course. It was almost a full-time class for one quarter. How tough were the Greek and Hebrew classes? That literally people would get divorced during those classes. Marguerite and I cracked up because as a couple, we got information. Can you tell us how you guys stayed married? Because so many of our students studying to be ministers got divorced going through these classes. So I took Hebrew to take some stress off because I was a really good student. I took it for the first time ever, pass-fail. Because everything else, I wanted to get A's. I wanted to excel. But Hebrew, all right, I'm just going to kind of skate. And I was it's a 10-week intense class. Halfway through, I think I was just skating. I had about a C, whatever, but that was good enough. It's just pass or fail. Then all of a sudden I found out, but if you want to go on and get your doctorate, you either have to pass a very, very difficult course in Hebrew, or you have to have gotten an A. So I was like, oh man, because I was only halfway through. It was not my final grade. The C was not my final grade. So I went and asked the professor, do you think there's any chance if I could work it up to an A? So together we made a plan. That was the hardest 5 academic weeks of my life, but I did it. I don't know what your life looks like right now, but the good news is for you, it's not yet your final grade. There is still time to start using what God has given you, to get plugged in, to be grateful, to try to work on how you view God and how you view other people, to love God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. Well done. At work, that probably means, hey, you did a good job. Well done. On the athletic field, that might mean you've met, perhaps even exceeded expectations. Well done at a restaurant means you don't know how good meat should be prepared. but if that's your deal, well done means your steak is ready. But when you hear well done from the master, it means a whole lot more than that. And it comes with a reward. Do you remember when I read that passage earlier? I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but you realize that the master said, you've been faithful over a few things. Now I'm going to give you a whole bunch. Do you realize this life is nothing? And if we can just be faithful over the few years, the few dollars, the few abilities, whatever we have, if we can be faithful with that, someday, eye is not seen, ear is not heard, nor is it entered into the mind of man. We haven't even conceived of the things that God has in store for us. And if we can just hang in there and hear, well done, man, you've been kind of faithful over these few things, I'm going to give you a lot. And did you miss the last one? He said, and enter into your master's happiness. The old King James there would say, enter into the joy of my Lord. Wow, what a promise. That's like, well done. And you know what? You think life was exciting? You think life had challenges? You think life had adventure? Listen, because you did pretty good with that earth stuff, I'm going to give you this in heaven. And come on in, man. Things are joyful here. I was out on the golf course the Monday after my brother died on a Saturday, and because I didn't know what to do with myself. I just go out, try to be mindless. And it was a drop-dead gorgeous day on the golf course. And I was a single with 3 other guys I didn't know. And several times on the course, behind my sunglasses, they couldn't see, I would just start to tear up because I was just hurt. I was missing my brother. I feel guilty. I'm like, how can I even be out here right now playing golf on a beautiful day when my brother's dead? And that's what I thought. Then I want to thank the Lord that I don't stop there. I have to keep fighting. And also I remember, but do you realize what your brother heard? Your brother's already heard, well done, good and faithful servant. He's enter into the joy of your master. I don't care how beautiful of a day it may have been on the golf course. It may have been the most beautiful day on the most beautiful golf course in human history. But I have to step back. But that doesn't touch a candle to the worst day in heaven, to the worst golf course, if there be golf courses in heaven. Wow, what a promise. I feel like sometimes, whether it's my dad or my brother, they'd almost want to say, goodbye, saints. But there's something better. So as for you and me, I want to challenge you. Don't withdraw. Don't hang back. However long some of you are young, you got a lifetime left. Some of you are kind of more retirement age like me. Man, I'm still believing I got 30 years, and maybe dreaming, 30 good years left, whatever. But whatever time I do have left, I want to make that count for the Lord. I want to make a difference. Not only am I not going to withdraw and get hurt and feel bad about it, I'm going to double my efforts. I'm going to preach harder, minister harder, love people harder. People I can't stand, try to forgive them anyway and love them anyway and try to make a difference with my life. Well done, good and faithful servant.